Back to the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
And guys, we're back after a long hibernation. I think it's been about 4 months since we've recorded an episode. New year, same pandemic.
Yeah.
How are you guys doing?
It's been I feel like it's been forever since we've recorded an episode. I think like I think you had like brainstormed like how long we would take off, and I think last episode you said, "Oh, we'll probably be a week or something like that."
Yeah.
So I remember that distinctly. But no, I mean, it's good to be back. It really does feel like forever, since we've done this. So. Yeah, no, but we are still in this pandemic.
Yep.
We're going to be in it next episode too. So, just like my headspace, like really recently I've started getting mentally back into baseball. For a while, my brain was kind of hibernating from baseball too. And just so much was going on in the world and, et cetera. A lot to pay attention to. So
I think Major League Baseball was like hibernating from baseball too, because there really wasn't too much guidance on what was going on until this week, pretty much. So we're kind of right on par with the rest of baseball, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And beyond that, also, I mean, we looked at how 2020 started with all these disputes between the MLBPA and the MLB, and we're kind of right back at that with some more public feuding and yeah.
And we'll get into that because it's still not totally clear how the baseball season is going to go. We got some updates today, but that could always change, and it's just a lot of weird stuff happening. But yeah, we're back to talk some Orioles baseball. Jesse, you wanted to say something there? It seemed like.
Oh no, I'm good now.
Okay, just took a deep breath to talk.
Yeah, it's the point's relevance has disappeared. So
okay,
keep going.
Well, so basically what we're gonna do today is pretty much kind of go back and walk through the Orioles offseason starting from October, the very beginning of October, pretty much till now, the last 4 months, and just sort of give our take on it because it's been a long time. We haven't talked about any of these things. Every other podcast probably has. So if you don't want to hear about Renato Nunez getting DFA'd or Jose Iglesias being traded, we're probably not the show for you today. But we want to get back up to speed, give our takes, give those hot, tasty takes. And then next week we can get back to current times and talk about, what the Orioles spring training is going to look like. So sound good?
Love it.
Good.
All right. So going back to, I think October 1st, this actually happened. It was announced that Doug Brocail, the Orioles pitching coach from last season, and Jose Flores, the third base coach from last season, were not going to be returning to the coaching staff. And in their place, this was announced later in the offseason, Chris Holt, who was the Orioles pitching coordinator, I believe, for the entire organization, will retain that title and also be the major league pitching coach. And then over at third base, Tony Mansolino will take over Flores' duties at third. So, let's talk about, I think I think we would all agree, probably the bigger move there is the pitching coach area. Let's talk about Doug Brocail departing, Chris Holt coming in. Do you think this is a net positive? Do you think, was Doug Brocail a drag on the pitching staff and Chris Holt's going to be an improvement there? I'll go to Eli first because Eli's kind of our pitching expert in the room here. Jesse, I know you know your stuff, but let's get Eli's take on Brocail's departure and Holt's promotion, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is I think it's a long time coming. Basically, when Michael Elias came over, he brought Sigmund Dahl and he brought Chris Holt. And, Chris Holt had a large part in making the Astros pitching pipeline what it was. And he's come over here and he has totally revamped our entire minor league system and the way we develop pitchers. We're seeing that, last year with the successes of Keegan Aiken and Dean Kremer as they came up to the major leagues. And, beyond that, looking forward, Grayson Rodriguez is a top 40 prospect in the MLB. DL Hall is a top 70 prospect or so. And he's clearly had a lot of success, integrating analytics into the way that we develop talent. And I think that, I think it was inevitable that he was going to end up working with the major league staff.
Yeah, no, for sure. Jesse, do you have similar thoughts there or a different take?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think the move is expected. I guess the one thing that I would add is that you know, I mean, yeah, the pitching staff last year, had a lot to be desired. It was, a short pandemic season, but there was obviously a lot to be desired, with the exception of, the young guys that were coming up through the system that everybody, Oriole fans, and the organization are excited about. So he kind of is representative of the ray of hope that the organization has for the future. And that's why I think the move makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I don't know how many players and who exactly, but you've heard a bunch of, especially the young guys, credit Chris Holt with kind of changing their whole view on how to pitch as a professional. And, we saw, I think it wasn't obviously not last year because there was no minor league season, but the year prior to that, a bunch of players saw their strikeout totals jump through the roof. DL Hall, like you said, I think Michael Ballman had a really nice jump. And I think he specifically has mentioned Chris Holt by name a bunch of times. So I think it made sense to have Doug Brocail, the pitching coach, for a couple of years. He was working with a more experienced staff, guys that were maybe a little more old school. He knew how to handle the more veteran pitchers. Now we're getting to the point where Michael Ballman might debut this year. Zach Lothar may debut this year. Probably not DL Hall or Grayson Rodriguez, but likely next year. You need to have the pitching coach there that they are more comfortable with, that they agree with their philosophy. So I think this is huge. So, we'll see if it works or not. It all is up in the air. But I think for what the Orioles are going for, this makes a lot of sense. Does anybody have any takes on the change at third base? Any thoughts at all about Jose Flores leaving and Tony Mansolino coming in?
The only tiny note that I have is when Terry Francona had his health issues and somebody needed to take over. Mansolino was the guy in Cleveland, so
Okay.
they clearly trusted him. That's all I know about him.
Okay. And I mean, Francona's, arguably a top 5 manager in the game, I think you could say.
For sure.
Jesse's got a take.
I don't like to. I wouldn't like to argue that Terry Francona is the top 5 manager, but no. I mean, the only thing that I can, I guess the one little thing that I have to add is that Flores got, who was the player this year he got into the fight with? He was like yelling at, like, on the field.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'll have to Google this right now.
Yeah, that's the incident that I was thinking about. When I saw this happen. And obviously, like, I don't think it was that one thing, and that's what, resulted in him departing.
It was Richard Blyer, by the way.
Right. Okay.
Which he's already gone, but yeah.
Right. So, but that could have been, yeah, I mean, this is purely speculation, but that could have been some sort of indication of his relationship with some of the players. So that is obviously pure speculation. Obviously there are guys that get in fights with each other or argue, heavy arguments with each other, and more or less, they're good teammates and they don't have, they're not a problem in the clubhouse.
Well, remember, Brandon Hyde got in a fight with Chris Davis. Now, I'm sure a lot of guys wanted to get into fights with Chris Davis sometimes, but it could have been something in that clubhouse a little bit. Although that was not
I think that was 2 years ago that happened.
Yeah. 2019.
Yeah. So, so I mean, that's what I was thinking about. Obviously, I don't think that has a big role on, him departing. But I think that is kind of what I was thinking about, and it might be, tangentially relevant.
We shall see. Hopefully there's no fights in the dugout this year, but it's something to keep note of. All right, moving to a player movement here. I thought it was, an interesting move at the time. It looks like he's likely going to make the roster. And I think the end of October, early November, the Orioles claimed Yolmer Sanchez off waivers from the White Sox. Now, this is an interesting move because Sanchez actually has a Gold Glove. Not very common for you to be able to nab a Gold Glove player who's in his 20s off of waivers so early in the offseason. There was some question whether he would later get non-tendered. He wasn't. He was tendered a contract. All signs point to that he will likely be the Orioles' second baseman, but, let's discuss that. first off, were you guys maybe surprised that they got Sanchez? And also, what sort of role do you envision for him on the Orioles in 2021? Jesse, you
When
want
we,
to, or Eli's going to
oh,
go first? Okay.
my bad. When we yeah, so when we first claimed him, it made sense sort of from a depth perspective. But then as we, went through the series of moves that will follow this up, it started to make more and more sense that we were picturing him as somebody who would have pretty much an everyday role in the infield. And he's a light hitter, obviously, but like you said, former Gold Glover. I think for a young staff, putting a solid defense behind them, that coupled with the Freddie Galvis signing, it makes a pretty strong duo up the middle, and I think that's something that gives a lot of confidence for young pitchers, being able to throw the ball over the plate, being able to let hitters make contact, and being able to trust the defense behind you. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were some moves later on in the offseason that indicate that's kind of what Mike Elias is going for. But Jesse, all right, what's your take on Sanchez's role with the Orioles?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely. I mean, it's clearly a defensive upgrade when you think about Hanser Alberto being over at second base. So and at this stage in the Orioles' development, it's much more important for the Orioles to be playing good defense than it is for the Orioles to be hitting, right? I mean, definitely, I think over time the hitting will come, right? If we have a great hitting, if we have great hitters right now, it's good, but it's not really amounting to much, right? We're still probably not competing for, the division or anything like that. So it makes sense to kind of like establish the defense first. We're trying to get the pitching in order. So the defense is going to work together, with, like Eli was saying, improving the pitching staff. So, and especially with a young staff, the last thing you want to see is, extra outs and errors happening in the field and, all of those things. You want the pitcher to go out there feeling good, feeling comfortable, and not, getting frustrated and disappointed when his teammates make mistakes on the field and give the other team extra chances. So I think from a defense, first perspective, this is, obviously a good move. I think also that it is important, it's what the Orioles are always looking for, right? Infield depth, right? And Sanchez represents that. He could play all over the infield. Obviously, he'll primarily be at second base, and hopefully with some continuity, he'll be at second base. Just so, like Eli was saying, the duo up the middle can stay together and be consistent. But if needed, he can move around. So that is a really encouraging thing to know. The Orioles are always looking for infield depth. And if you look at us the last two seasons, we really have not had it, at least defensively. So it is good to see. And then the final point that I'll make is that it's also good from the Orioles' perspective, from a money perspective. Because as we'll get to, Alberto would have made like $2.4 million, and Sanchez is going to be making like $1 million this upcoming year.
Mm-hmm.
So of course the Orioles are always in the business of cutting costs, at least at this stage, as much as possible. So it was just kind of like these three things, or these several things all lined up. The Orioles had an opportunity to get Sanchez, so it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think the money thing is also a recurring theme this offseason. It's a lot of cutting costs, but I'm not sure the Orioles are actually worse than they were at the start of the offseason. I think they might be better. I think pitching, you could probably argue they're maybe a little less depth there, and we'll talk about that in a bit here. But yeah, I mean, the cutting cost has been huge. I'm looking at Yolmer Sanchez's Baseball Reference right now, and at the bottom, you can look at his salaries through his career. And in 2019, he made $4.6 million with the White Sox. That was the season he won Gold Glove. Then he was signed by the Giants last offseason, released by them in August. Doesn't have a salary on here because I think it was a minor league deal. Which the guy's he's got a weird career. He wins a Gold Glove, then signs as a minor league free agent. Now he's claimed off of waivers, and he's going to be making $3.5 million less than he was before he won the Gold Glove. It's very strange. But yeah, it's the cost cutting has been a huge thing. Kind of on that note, let's move on to what the Orioles did later in November. Renato Nunez, I think this was one of the more predictable moves of the offseason. The Orioles designated Renato Nunez for assignment. It was essentially a move to kind of, make some space on the 40-man roster. And Nunez, I think, is just now talking to a team about a potential
Tigers, I saw.
The Tigers about a minor league deal. So it's kind of indicative that he was released, 3 months ago, 2.5 months ago, and he's just now talking to a team about a minor league deal. But Nunez was DFA'd. What do you guys think about this move? And Jesse, maybe we'll start with you this time. Were you expecting Nunez to be DFA'd, or what are your thoughts on the move in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think this, of course, makes a lot of sense too. It was expected. I guess the main things to focus on, from my perspective, is that one, he doesn't play defense, right?
Correct.
He just does not play defense, and so obviously that that makes things very inconvenient. I mean, you really have to be a good hitter if you're not going to play defense, and obviously we know about his hitting ability. I mean, we've seen him. He has weeks where he'll hit 4 or 5 home runs in a single week, right? And like, he does have those moments where you can see the flashes and you can see the talent, the hitting talent that he does have. But on the other hand, the big thing is, we've had him roughly 2.5 years or so.
Yep.
And last year, obviously, a big asterisk next to it. But there hasn't been much progression in his hitting, and we haven't seen any tremendous movement. His power actually probably dipped a little bit last year, if you're like, at least in the home runs. I mean, obviously, he had 31 home runs in 2019 and 12 in 2020, but the pandemic season. But still, even if you do the math, it's less home runs. So the fact that he dipped, and then he's doesn't get on base that much. He has a regular average, like 240, 250, 260 hitter, probably somewhere in that range. And he just a low on base percentage. So the fact that he hasn't, he's not mashing the ball to the degree that he would need to one, not play defense, and two, not get on base, not be a threat on the base path, et cetera. So.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a one-dimensional player. I mean, his slugging percentage was higher last year, was the highest of his career. His OPS plus was pretty good too, 121. But to your point, he doesn't play defense. He literally just is a power guy at a time when the Orioles have the likes of Ryan Mountcastle, Trey Mancini, maybe throw Chris Davis in there, although there's not a whole lot of power left. And we're actually Santander. So these are a lot of guys that, the Orioles just had this situation 3 years ago with Mark Trumbo and Pedro Alvarez, and these guys that were kind of one-dimensional. It doesn't make a lot of sense to get right back into the same situation with, arguably a lesser crew of I don't know, I'd say the Orioles, maybe that crew of just power guys is a little better now than it was a couple of years ago. But yeah, no, the Nunez move was definitely expected. Eli, what's kind of your take on the DFA of Nunez?
Yeah, this kind of ties in. The next thing we'll talk about is Hanser Alberto, spoiler alert. But this kind of ties in with him, and really, what these two dudes are is known quantities. When you're in a rebuild at this point, you pick up players, you see what you can get out of them, you see if you could potentially flip them for trade value, if they're potentially young enough to be on the next good Orioles team. And like we've been saying, Renato Nunez, he's a one-dimensional player, and that one dimension hasn't, fully developed into what we hoped it would. You really can't stick him anywhere on the infield. You can expect a little bit of pop, but overall, he's not good enough as a hitter and not consistent enough as a hitter to be a reliable DH. And, because of that, it's more valuable to explore the prospects of someone else than it is to keep him on the team and potentially be a little bit better. That's just where we are. And yeah, paying him $3-4 million is totally out of the question as an Oriole. So
yeah,
it made sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like that was a good point about the trading. I would imagine Mike Elias called every number in his book to see if they were interested in Renato Nunez. Clearly they weren't. Clearly nobody was, because it's now middle of February, and the Tigers, who are one of probably the 5 worst teams in baseball, are the people calling him up for a minor league deal. They're not even, I'm sure they're giving him an invite to major league camp, but it's pretty indicative of both what he is as a player and also where the market in baseball is. Power is not one-dimensional. Power is not as valued as it was a decade ago.
Well, power probably today is more common than it used to be. So
right.
So I mean, like, that's what I mean. If it was power paired with a really nice glove, now we're talking. But a guy that literally can't even field at all is a drain when he's in the field, is a non-starter. All right, so let's talk about Hanser Alberto. Eli, you brought him up. He recently just got a deal with the Royals. I think a minor league deal, though. So, again, sort of another starter for the Orioles drops to minor league for another team. Hanser Alberto, though, he was a guy that, there was definitely a lot of thought he could be sacrificed this offseason. There was hope he could come back to the Orioles on some sort of deal. It didn't happen. But, that whole sort of process there of Alberto non-tendered, but Sanchez, who we mentioned earlier, was tendered a contract. And then also Pat Valaika was tendered a contract. So, sort of that trio of moves. Was there anything in there that surprised you? Anything unexpected? I know I personally was kind of a little surprised that Valaika got a contract. Jesse, you're shaking your head. Yeah. What were your thoughts on the non-tenders or tenders?
Well, the thing about Valaika is it just contradicts. I mean, he's more of a hitter than a fielder. Mm-hmm. So, from that perspective, the move is a little surprising, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he was a quite a good hitter last year, though, and he can play more positions. He's terrible at shortstop. We know this, but I think he would even admit, I'm not really a major league caliber shortstop. I kind of just did it because Jose Iglesias was hurt for half the year or most of the year. But Eli, you were getting ready to say something?
Yeah, the point about playing more positions is what I was going to say. The fact that we can flip Pat Valaika to the outfield also helps significantly. And the fact that he's cheaper than Alberto would have been is another huge factor here, of course.
Yeah, I don't have the number what Valaika is going to make this year. I can find it, but I would imagine it's not going to be a whole heck of a lot. But he was a surprising hitter in the middle of the Orioles lineup. I don't imagine he'll be in the middle of the Orioles lineup again, just because I think you probably move Mountcastle up a little bit. You probably got Trey Mancini back in there, but Valaika surprised me how solid he was at the plate throughout the year. So I'm interested to see. Eli's got some feedback here.
Valaika, $875,000.
Okay, so, well, there you go.
Yeah,
so for a guy
almost
that had
$2 million less.
Yeah, had an OPS plus of 114, and you hopefully never have to give him the spot at shortstop for the entire year with, Sanchez and a couple other guys we're going to mention here in a little bit. I can see the value there. But Alberto non-tendered. Were we surprised about that, Jess?
I mean, I think it's consistent with how the Orioles have been running things recently, right? And how Elias has been running things recently. The one thing I will say that, you've kind of talked about is, even though we know Alberto is not the greatest player, right? He has been over the past couple of years one of the more like fan favorites, right? And I don't think that, there's going to be a fan rebellion exactly because we don't have Hanser Alberto on the team anymore. But I do kind of wonder whether this is just like another example of the Orioles being, too ruthless in a sense. And at the bare minimum, frustrating fans. I mean, that, that's kind of how I feel. And even in when Elias was talking about the move, he's like, we love him. He was great in the clubhouse, great on and off the field. Well, I mean, my opinion is if you love him so much, then, and if you love him so much as in the clubhouse and as a player, then you find a way to keep him on the team, right? But it's kind of, it reminds me of kind of like Cesar Torres, like from a long time ago. Like everybody would talk about how great he is. Every manager wants him on the club. He's a great defensive shortstop, etc. And then he just like bounced around the league like nonstop. So it kind of, I don't know. That's kind of what I think. And I do think about the fans with the loss of Alberto, and, who the Orioles can, who the Oriole fans can, obviously we could be excited about some of the new guys coming up, but it's getting pretty thin in who Oriole fans can, be excited to go watch, and, they've known for a long time and they're comfortable with, like those players are disappearing on the team. So kind of the big case for why you said, you think we should generally keep Mancini on the team. There is some of that explanation that would be warranted in Alberto's situation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there's definitely a difference in a Trey Mancini, a guy who came up through the system. Now you add the cancer card to it. A huge story of this guy who's battled through something when he was at the peak of his game to come back. Alberto seems like a really good guy. He'd been with the team for 2 seasons, was a waiver claim type of a guy. I think we all understood this was a stopgap kind of a player. And last year, we've discussed on the show before, his offensive performance dipped slightly from what it was the year before, which even the year before, he did all these nice things with high average. He still was only about an league average hitter. He's a guy that needs to constantly play at the peak of his offensive ability to have value. And when that dips even a little bit, it's kind of hard to rationalize spending $2 or $3 million on him. When you can get a guy like Yolmer Sanchez, who's going to probably give you, maybe slightly less offensive value, but much more defensive value. So while I really like Hanser Alberto, and I would have gladly welcomed him back to the Orioles on some sort of deal, I don't necessarily think the Orioles are any worse now at second base than they were when the offseason started. They might even be a little bit better off.
Agreed.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I think he was a fan favorite. I just struggle to see. I get where you're coming from, but he wasn't. He's not Melvin Mora type of guy, a good player during the dark ages. Melvin Mora was. Melvin Mora's the best.
Yeah, they're degrees here. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. Like he's not Cal Ripken. I'm not claiming that. So.
No, but I think like your point of. The bad Orioles teams of our youth, like not the 2012 Orioles who were good and we were a little older. I'm saying like 2005 Orioles where, there's pretty much, I guess Brian Roberts was on the team then. It was pretty much Brian Roberts and Melvin Mora and like everybody else was terrible, basically. In that case, Hanser Alberto, I think, would be included in the other guys that are terrible. You know what I mean? He's not Trey Mancini. He's not Anthony Santander type of level, All right, let's talk another move that happened on the same day that Alberto was non-tendered. Jose Iglesias was dealt to the Angels for 2 right-handed pitchers, Garrett Stallings and Gene Pinto. Stallings is currently listed as the Orioles' 26th best prospect on MLB Pipeline. However, he's yet to pitch in the professional levels because the Angels, he was a 2019 draft pick. The Angels did not put him into a game that year. That's kind of a thing the Angels do a lot where they don't put draft picks into games the year they draft them. And then obviously 2020 was canceled. And then Pinto is 20 years old, not currently ranked as a top prospect. He's appeared in 3 Dominican Summer League games in 2019, and that is the extent of his experience. So let's kind of talk about this in 2 parts. First, Iglesias leaving. And I'll go to Eli first here with this. So Iglesias was arguably the Orioles' best hitter in 2020. Never really got to show the defensive ability that he has. Was pretty affordable, was only going to make, I think, $3.5 million this year. What did you think about the Orioles dealing dealing Iglesias, given the fact that kind of what we already talked about, they brought in Sanchez, him and Iglesias healthy would be a really good up the middle defensive tandem. What did you think, and what do you still think about the Orioles dealing away Jose Iglesias?
Yeah, this year was just ruthless. I mean, this was cold-hearted. This was, yeah, it was ruthless. The Orioles, picked up his option for $3.5 million, which seemed like a no-brainer. Phenomenal defense, had showed really wonderful things with the bat, and making an absurdly cheap salary for somebody who's a borderline Gold Glover, year in, year out. He led all shortstops and outs above average in 2020, despite playing obviously an even smaller sample size because of all of his quad injuries.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so when he played really good defense. When he was at the plate, he hit 370 something. He was clearly at the top of his game. He was making an absurdly cheap salary. The premier shortstops in the league. Lindor's going to make 20 some this year, et cetera, et cetera. And so this was just, this was not acting in the best interest of the 2020 Baltimore Orioles. And, that's fine. Obviously, we're in a rebuild. But this one stung a little bit just because they gave Iglesias this press conference saying how excited they were to have him back, and it just made a lot of sense seeing how he was last year, wondering what we were going to get out of this year. Hopefully seeing a full healthy season out of him, and then just having none of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was definitely a punch to the gut. You couldn't have totally unexpected it, or it couldn't have been totally unexpected rather, but it was a little bit disappointing for sure. So Jesse, I'll let you kind of add on to that, but also, Jess, if you want to touch on the return here, Stallings and Pinto, do you think this was the case of too good to turn down? They had to pull the trigger on a deal for Stallings and Pinto, or do you still think maybe the value of Jose Iglesias on the 2021 Orioles for $3.5 million was a little bit worth more than these two potential major league players? We don't even know yet.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Eli said. And the one thing to consider is, we got frustrated when VR got traded with $10 million left for 1 year. And, obviously from Elias's perspective, it makes sense or whatever to not pay $10 million when you don't have to. But this is, this is a third of that, right? And $3.5 million for a major league shortstop, is really not that unbearable a price to pay for a major league shortstop, even for a team that is not competitive at the moment. So I do want to keep that in mind. What I'll say is that, I obviously don't know a lot about these players. I can just see like their rankings and everything. But what is for sure is that they are definitely unknown. They're giant unknowns. And we have some idea of who they are, but we haven't seen them play in a long time. So we really don't know what we're getting.
Yeah, no, for sure. Stallings was a 2019 draft pick. You imagine that Elias had a pretty good scouting report on him. He went in the 5th round of 2019. So, relatively high. He goes right into the Orioles top 30. As a 26th best, that's basically sort of a fringe starter, bullpen, middle innings type of guy. It's not a future Grayson Rodriguez, DL Hall level of prospect, but it's intriguing. You can maybe say based on a move the Orioles made later in the winter, which we'll get to in just a second, you could see maybe, okay, that's worth the payoff of Iglesias for Galvis, but we'll discuss that maybe in a little bit. But it is tough to see all of these good players, not all of these, but a lot of the names, kind of go out the door for these future players who it's very possible. It's probably even likely that Stallings and Pinto never even pitch in the big leagues. The odds of it happening are probably better than them both being 10-year MLB veterans. So we'll see. But Iglesias is no more. The Orioles are going to have to get used to a new shortstop who we'll talk about in just a couple minutes. But first I want to talk about later in December, the Orioles had sort of a big move for the organization. It's happened all around baseball. Major League Baseball is contracting the size of minor league baseball. I believe 40 teams got removed, and that included the Frederick Keys, who were the Orioles High A affiliate. They will stay affiliated with Major League Baseball. They'll be joining the MLB Draft League, which it's a little bit confusing what it is. It sounds like it's sort of a Cape Cod type of deal there. I would encourage you guys to go online and take a look at what that is. But the Keys are no longer affiliated with the Orioles. In their place, the Aberdeen Ironbirds will be moving from short season, which is getting eliminated completely, and they will become the Orioles full season high A affiliate. So if you live in the Aberdeen, Harford County area, you guys have a lot more baseball to watch. But I was interested to see if you guys have ever been to Keys games, if you have any memories with the Keys and sort of what your thoughts are of, maybe Frederick in general losing a team and, at large, MLB sort of contracting minor league baseball. Did you guys have any thoughts on that, good, bad, or indifferent?
I'll just throw out a couple thoughts. Mike Piazza, one of the best catchers ever, was drafted in the 62nd round of the 1988 draft. And baseball is a really, really funny sport in the fact that these dudes who are getting drafted, regardless of where they get drafted from, number one pick, top pitcher out of Vanderbilt, Jack Leiter, Kumar Rocker next year, those dudes are not good enough to play in the MLB when they get drafted. And, there are a million different pathways that people can take to get to the MLB. And the minor leagues, kind of as a consequence of that, need to be a really pretty expansive, robust system, to give all these players opportunities at various stages of development, under various coaching styles, et cetera, et cetera. And, clearly what this is it's cost cutting for the major league teams. They don't get much revenue from these teams. They simultaneously have to put out jerseys. They have to put out XYZ, and they're contracting their operations. And it's nothing besides that. And, you look at, I think it was Staten Island who got cut by the Yankees, and, they had assurances that they were going to make it through the season. And, they had assurances that they'd be a part of the Yankees organization for years and years to come. And a lot of this is, the MLB, the teams holding the power, the teams just deciding to contract their operations regardless of really how it impacts anyone else, because it's good for their wallets. And I think it's as simple as that. It makes me sad. I think the Keys, I'll look it up while Jesse's talking, but the Keys have been an affiliate of the Orioles for a long, long time, and they're pretty well ingrained in that Frederick, community. So it's just a sad thing to see. Yeah.
Yeah, Jess?
Well, yeah, and I mean, what I think it is, honestly, I think it's a very, very short-sighted move. And the thing is, yes, Major League Baseball, these teams will be saving a little bit of money here and up front, right? But, the long-term consequences and the long-term impact of this, is exactly, these players not getting the opportunity that, maybe it's too much to say they should get necessarily, but that is possible for them to get, right? And there are going to be future Hall of Famers, that get, well, it's very likely that, a possible future Hall of Famer or somebody, an all-star, whatever, will go undiscovered basically, and, will never be exposed, will never get the exposure to the right coaches, and move their way up through the system, in the ways that they should, without, these outlets and these opportunities for people to play. So, I definitely, like, if you look at like soccer, in like Europe, right? They have like academies, and they have, they have kids playing soccer 14, 15, even younger than that sometimes, right? That they have their eye on, that they're paying attention to, that even in the United States, like, you know, there is some of that for like the MLS and stuff. There are like academies and stuff.
And those
And
academies are affiliated too.
yeah,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
exactly. And you know, in the long run, that's really beneficial, right? I mean, at least from the sports perspective, right? Because more people are playing, more people are being introduced to the sport. You know, it creates a healthier game in the long run. And you know, with the cutting of, you know, minor league teams, that's exactly what happens. Is, you know, yes, they save a little bit of money, but the long-term well-being of the game is being severely compromised. And the last thing I'll say is kind of like what Eli touched on, is just, you know, how important minor league baseball is to certain communities, right? There are, you know, like in Aberdeen, right? Like the Ironbirds are like a big part of what Aberdeen is, right? There are towns across the United States where, you know, there's not much going on in the town except the minor league baseball stadium, you know, that is accessible, right? And it's affordable baseball for people to go watch. It's accessible. You know, most of the time it's accessible for, you know, a lot of people. You always say, Tyler, that, you know, it's like the best value for watching baseball. You know, because you know, it's very cheap to go to a game, and the players are very good, obviously. So, you know, just the damage that it does do to the communities when teams are cut like this. You know, you can't, I mean, you know, nobody's going to measure it, but it's definitely going to impact people and impact how communities are structured, you know, to some degree, how people's lives are structured. And, you know, of course, I think it's detrimental. And I think, you know, it's a very short-sighted move.
Yeah.
Just to chime back in real quick, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
1989, so 30 plus years, 31 years that the Frederick Keys were an Orioles affiliate, and hosting games virtually every night during the summer. Yeah, so
No, yeah, it's a
30
total
years.
shame. I mean, so my only connection to the Keys, I went to, I think, one game when I was a kid. I remember it was a friend from elementary school, went with his dad. He bought me a bat, like one of those little mini wooden bats at the little gift shop. So that's really the only Keys game I've ever been to. You know, it's out towards Western Maryland, not my neck of the woods, but like what you guys were kind of talking about, Frederick's not around the corner from Baltimore. You know, it's a good ways out there. That is a legitimate, affordable entertainment option for families who, you know, whether you're on a budget or not, it's something to take the kids to. They've got, it's obviously marketed towards young families. I think it's cheap. In between innings, it's got little goofy stuff going on in between every single inning. You know, it's sponsored almost exclusively by local companies. You know, you don't see, like, it's not Nike and Visa and Chevy that have their logos on the outfield. It's like Bob's Air Conditioning, and it's, you know, Ma and Pa's Diner. Those are the types of places that advertise there, because those are the communities they are typically in. My other connection with minor league baseball is I was an intern for the Aberdeen Ironbirds the summer after I graduated college. And, you know, the Ironbirds are probably, you know, I don't know all the financials, but I would imagine the Ironbirds are one of the best funded minor league teams in the country, because they got the Ripkins behind them, whatever. But even that, you know, I got paid $75 a day to work there. But, you know, it's still like the people that sell the tickets are also the same people that come out and pull the tarp for the rain delays. You know, it's on a shoestring budget. You know, I'm sure the major league teams contribute some sort of financials beyond the player salaries, but I don't think it's very much. These people that work at for these teams don't make a ton of money. You know, these are small businesses essentially. These minor league teams a lot of times are small businesses. Some of them are, you know, conglomerates that own 10 minor league teams, but a lot of them are small businesses that are now essentially being put out of business, or it's going that way. You know, the Keys have some sort of a parachute here with the MLB Draft League, and, you know, hopefully there'll be some sort of independent organizations that, you know, develop to you know, create some really cool Cape Cod type of leagues, or maybe some sort of independent leagues that have some of these guys that normally would get drafted in the 50th round or whatever. But yeah, I mean, this is just sort of more of what we're seeing all around baseball. There's obviously a concerted effort to make the MLB draft shorter. It was only 5 rounds this past year. It sounds like what they're probably going to go to is like a 10-round draft permanently, maybe a little bit longer than that. And, they're also putting caps on what you can sign the players that don't get drafted for. And it's some measly amount that's much less than they would have gotten if they were drafted in the 25th round or the 30th round or something like that. And teams are also, what they're doing is drafting senior players that probably aren't good enough to be drafted in the first 5 rounds, but they're drafting them so they can sign them for less, and then sign these players that are probably like 4th or 5th round talents that are high school seniors, so they can then sign them for less. It's all, it's very obvious what they're doing, and it's pretty gross, and it's all in the margins. And to your point, Jesse, it's likely going to cost some team a future Hall of Famer, or because, yes, there's the Mike Piazza getting drafted in the 62nd round. There's also Albert Pujols, who got drafted in like the 15th round or something like that. These are guys that, even if you kept the draft reasonably long, you're going to get really good players late in the draft. It doesn't happen all the time, but it certainly happens enough. So, it's business. It's the part of baseball that's not a lot of fun. It's unfortunate. It stinks. I don't blame the Orioles alone, but this is a concerted effort of all 30 MLB franchises and the MLB offices to spend less money while also making just as much revenue. And baseball, whatever the owners say, they're not hurting for money. They make plenty of money. The money is there. So just because they had the pandemic last year, don't buy into there's no money to go around. Sure, there might be a little less this year than there was last year, but there's still millions and billions of dollars to go around. So this is just penny pinching, and it affects as it always does, the lowest guy on the totem pole, unfortunately. So it sucks for Frederick. It sucks for Maryland. It sucks for baseball. We move on. It's nice that the Ironbirds will have a few more games. But yeah, go support your local minor league team. I always make it a point when I'm down the Eastern Shore to try and go to a Shorebirds game. It's a lot of fun. There's always a lot of good players down there. So it sucks. Check it out and support these small businesses when you can. All right. So let's get back to some Orioles on-field moves. Just after, because it was the same week, the winter meetings, after the Keys lost their Orioles affiliation, the Orioles did make 2 selections in the Rule 5 draft. One of them was Max Scruller, who is the nephew of Ben McDonald. And then they also drafted Tyler Wells, 2 pitchers. With the Orioles' current pitching situation, it's looking more likely that at least one of these guys will make the major league team out of spring training. The Orioles took 2 pitchers a season ago. Both of them were returned to their original organizations. But do you guys see anything different? Scruller, Wells, I don't expect you guys necessarily to have a full scouting report. But Eli, I feel like you might know a little bit more because you seem to be a little more plugged into the minor league stuff. So do you have any thoughts on Scruller and Wells and maybe their odds of making the major league team?
Yeah, I will say I only dug in a little bit. But basically, Scroller, he had made it to Double-A and then had Tommy John, missed all of the 2019 season, and then 2020 was what it was. He seems like a pitchability guy. They say he's got a really good splitter, but 4-pitch mix. And then Tyler Wells is just a super tall dude. He's 6'8", also has a 4-pitch mix, and they just talk about the angle that he creates.
Yeah, great first
being
name.
Really difficult. Yeah, Tyler, good. It's good. Yeah, he also topped out at Double-A. They both had good results when they were pitching. Yeah, I think it's difficult to judge really. Yeah. Scroller, really, the majority of his experience was only at High A, and he's 24 years old, and so I kind of have a hard time envisioning him fully making that jump, especially coming off of Tommy John and then not playing organized ball next year. It's more believable to me that Tyler Wells makes the roster, but we'll see.
The thing I'm wondering is, if the season is shortened, do they just have to make it through the shortened season, or do they have to continue it as if they were on the DL or something, or the IL.
I think they just have to make it through the shortened season.
Yeah.
Because I believe like last year, if you played all, not all 60 games, but if you stayed on the roster the whole year, you got a full year of service time.
Mhm.
And that's essentially what it kind of comes down to is the service time you accumulate. So, yeah, I think it probably wouldn't even have to be the whole season. It would have to be probably like 45 games or something if it was like 60 like last year.
Mhm.
Although, I mean, it sounds like they're going to play all 162 this year. It might be delayed slightly, but I think the players are, or at least like 150, something like that. But the players are getting all their money, is my understanding. That's the main point.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Jesse, do you have a take on either of the players at all?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I don't know a lot about them. I haven't seen them pitch or anything, but yeah, I mean, the shortened season obviously gives the Orioles more opportunity, to get them through the season. So, from that perspective, this is a good time to take Rule 5 draft picks, because there's less long-term liability for having them on the team.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's I felt kind of similar as last year when they took 2 Rule 5 guys. Hey, maybe one of them make the team. We needed starters. We needed a long man. Neither one of them made it. So we'll see. It all depends on how they look in spring training. I think these are again gap type of players. These are not going to be future aces of the staff. These are guys that might start a few games, give a couple innings out of the bullpen. I don't think we have to worry a whole heck of a lot about Max Scruller or Tyler Wells. If they make it, cool. Maybe we get a TJ McFarland type of player out of it. If they don't, maybe he was a Jason Garcia type who was a complete waste of a roster spot the season the Orioles had him. But okay, Rule 5 draft, kind of boring, whatever.
Yeah. The one thing I do want to throw out, though, this is the first time in a long time that the Orioles have actually lost players in the Rule 5 draft, which speaks very highly of our minor league system. And there was like the one that I was particularly upset about. We lost Zach Pop, which he was a pretty electric, triple digits kind of high leverage reliever. We lost Gray Fenter as well, who I'm not quite as upset about. But we were talking about Chris Holt and how he's been developing the Orioles pitching pipeline in very, very impressive ways. And the fact that we lost 2 pitchers speaks to that.
Yeah, Pop got picked and then traded, I think. He went from the Diamondbacks, I think, to like the Marlins or something. So clearly there was some interest there. Pop, he was part of the Machado trade, right? Was triple digits. I think he had some arm issues last year, the year before. And then, Gray Fenter has not pitched above Delmarva yet. So it'll be interesting if he's able to stick. The Orioles could get both of them back. But yeah, it's definitely interesting that the Orioles are starting to be one of the teams that gets picked from instead of picking to add to. So moving on from that, the Orioles did find a shortstop finally at the end of January. I said January weird. At the end of January, the Orioles signed Freddie Galvis to a 1-year deal worth $1.5 million, making it the second year in a row that the Orioles have signed the Reds shortstop from the previous season. So Freddie Galvis, do we expect him to be the Orioles' everyday shortstop? Is he a lock? Or Richie Martin, who is dealing with some injury issues right now. Do we think Richie Martin might have a legitimate shot at maybe unseating him as the favorite to be the Orioles shortstop? Jesse, you want to go first?
I would say we can say that Galvis is pretty much a lock.
Agreed.
Yeah, that is. I would agree. I mean, I think this is a poorer man's version of what Jose Iglesias was going to give the Orioles. I don't think we could have expected Iglesias to be quite as good of a hitter as he was a season ago, but probably a touch better than Galvis. Although Galvis will probably give us a little more pop than Iglesias. I know Iglesias went doubles crazy last year, but in general, Galvis has a little more power. And Galvis is probably a little bit worse fielder than Iglesias, but Iglesias has these injuries now. Maybe that adds up and they're about even. So again, I could see the Orioles say, hey, we're getting essentially the same type of value or type of production for $2 million less dollars, $2 million fewer dollars. So I can see the wheels in Mike Elias's head spinning. I mean, do you think Galvis is an upgrade, or at least maybe a similar production as an Iglesias, or do you think this is a step down, however minuscule it might be?
Well, what I'll say is he's definitely a big step down from Iglesias's production last year.
Right.
So if Iglesias were to repeat that, which granted is unlikely, but if he were to, this would obviously be a big decline. But normal Iglesias, Iglesias is definitely better in the field. On a normal Iglesias hitting year, I would say they're relatively comparable. They, each have their own strengths, with different aspects of hitting. But I would say relatively comparable. But yeah, so that's how I would answer that.
Thank you.
The one big thing that I want to throw out, in both 2017 and 18, Freddie Galvis played all 162. And he's shown a proclivity for durability. And I think that after last year, when we did have so many problems, as we talked about having to plug Pat Valaika in at shortstop so consistently, I think that's something that the Orioles were really looking for. We talked about just establishing a good defense behind these young pitchers as they come up to the major league level and try to figure out what they need to do to pitch. And having, both a consistent and good glove behind them is something that's incredibly valuable. And, I don't think we necessarily banked on signing Freddie Galvis when we traded Iglesias. I think that was a self-contained move, but I think that we are very, very happy to land Freddie Galvis for a year.
Yeah, I mean, it's another one of those shortstop. I think for the last 20 years has been kind of a problem position for the Orioles, aside from when they had JJ Hardy. I mean, then the Manny Machado 1-year deal, but it's always kind of been a position that has stymied them a little bit. I remember the days of Devi Cruz, Cesar Turris for a year. Miguel Tejada was a really good hitter. Clearly, we had a good run there, but again, defensively, I'm not so sure. Probably up and down. But
Julio Lugo.
Okay, that's another bad one.
Well, yeah, I'm just throwing out
sure.
another shortstop.
No, shortstop's just a position that has troubled the Orioles, especially to develop shortstop. So again, Tejada was really good, but they had to give him a huge contract. Hardy was good; they had to trade for him. The Orioles have struggled to develop shortstops. There's hope maybe Gunnar Henderson can be that kind of guy, but there's also thoughts he's going to move over to third base or to center field or something like that. So. Galvis is a nice stopgap. I'm curious where we go from here beyond this year. I don't think Richie Martin is any kind of answer. There are, of course, options in the minors. But, yeah, Galvis is fine. I mean, it's fine. It's similar to Iglesias. I felt about Iglesias a year ago, maybe a little worse than how I felt about Iglesias when we signed him. But, yeah, it's fine. It'll get us to the next season.
I mean, we definitely, to your point, though, we definitely need to find a long-term solution, though, right? And that is something that needs to be a high priority for the Orioles. Any competitive baseball team is going to have a good shortstop.
Well, that's why we've been drafting, 50% shortstops for the last couple of years.
Right.
So,
well, and I mean, we should say Henderson has been getting really good, like, rave reviews from everybody about how he looked in the summer camp last year. MLB Pipeline put out their top 100 prospects, and he was one of the 10 after. So he's like in the top 110 prospects. He's not on their 100 list, but he's just after. And, after a couple guys graduate, he will, of course, be on the top 100. I think Baseball America wrote a pretty glowing piece about Jordan Westberg, one of the picks from last year. So there are definite, and he's a shortstop. I think I forget where he went, Mississippi State or Mississippi, one of them. But so they're out there. We'll see. And Westberg's a guy that might get here faster than Henderson just because he's a college guy versus a high school guy. So we'll see. But yeah, shortstop's been a problem. But as Eli said, the Orioles are attempting to address it. All right. Then on Groundhog Day, we had a pair of pitching moves. Actually, it was kind of 3 moves over the course of 2 days, which kind of are all connected. But we'll start with the Wade LeBlanc move first. Wade LeBlanc was part of the Orioles rotation a season ago. He ended up missing more than half the season with an elbow injury. The Orioles are bringing him back on a minor league contract. So what do you guys think about this move? Do you think LeBlanc is going to have any kind of significant role on the Orioles in 2021 starting rotation, long man? It is a minor league deal with a spring training invite, so it's not necessarily a guaranteed spot in the rotation or anything. But any thoughts on how LeBlanc fits into the Orioles' plans?
I really think that I think he's purely depth. It's going to be a season of 162 games, and there are going to be a lot of people who didn't pitch in any organized fashion whatsoever that come up to the Orioles this year. They're going to be, everyone who did pitch in an organized fashion last year played in only 60 games, so a starting pitcher who, stubbed a toe one game, missed 2 starts, they only pitched, 8-9 times in the season. So, there's going to be a lot of concern for folks' arms, as they are trying to ramp back up to this much, much heavier workload. I'd expect to see somebody pitching every 6th day instead of every 5th. I'd expect to see a lot of that stuff around the league. And I think Wade LeBlanc is an insurance policy and nothing else.
Okay, so not starting rotation. Where do you think he starts the season at, or with the Orioles?
I think he starts the season in AAA.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think he quite breaks.
Okay, Jesse?
Yeah, no, I think he starts the season in AAA too. Sure, if we could get him on a minor league deal, why not? To me, it is kind of frustrating a little bit. Just because, he didn't really work out last year, and here we are, trying to address a problem by, putting a tiny, tiny Band-Aid over the problem, right? And yes, he's depth. Like, I can't logically disagree with the signing. Yeah, sure. We should get a bunch of these guys if we can, there's no reason not to have a guy like this in the organization. But it is just kind of frustrating because, he struggled last year, and here we are, trying to go back to the same well, and, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit, it's blah, but this is the kind of move I think pretty much every team does. Every team brings in, whether they're, the best rotation in the league or not, pretty much every team goes and signs some veteran, gives them a minor league deal, and sees how it goes. I looking at the Orioles roster, the more I think he's gonna be in the rotation to start the year. And not that that's a good thing, but if you look at sort of the 40-man, it's think about the rotation. It's John Means, Dean Kramer, Keegan Aiken, and then I have no idea. I have no idea who's in the rotation besides him. Maybe the Orioles swing a deal for somebody in what's left of the offseason, but I think LeBlanc starts in the rotation. And I think maybe it's almost they know he's going to break down, or they know he's going to struggle so much that after 5 or 6 starts, they kick him to the side. And then that's bought you enough time that you have an extra year of control on a Bauman, a Lothar, an Alex Wells, somebody like that. So I don't know. It's a lot. That's also not the best plan, because then you've got 4 rookies in a rotation. Dean Kramer looked good at times, but he only made a handful of starts. Keegan Aiken had ups and downs. And John Means, who's been really good at times and is an all-star, has only really 1 full year of major league experience at this point. So it's asking a lot of those 3 guys to make it through a full season. And then also throwing a guy like Wade LeBlanc, who's in his mid-30s, has struggled and has had arm injuries within the last year. It's a lot.
The one thing I would just add is Lopez too. I think he has a good shot.
That's fair. Again, that's not the most exciting option, but yeah, he probably is the number 4 right now. Jeez.
Yeah. He's the one guy in my mind, and then potential for, I think, someone like a Bruce Zimmerman, one of our AAA pitchability guys, and then I think that the next guy on our list has a much better shot to make the rotation.
And like you said, Tyler, that's a lot for Aiken and Kramer to deal with, Mm-hmm. That's a lot. Being, having to be not the 4 and 5, or not the 5 and 6, but instead being the 2 and 3,
Right.
yeah, that's a tough situation to be in.
And I could see Mike Elias, Brandon Hyde saying like, "Hey, we understand Dean Kramer's probably the second best pitcher on our staff, but we're not gonna put him as the second best pitcher. Like, we'll pitch him fourth or fifth or something, and you'd have Wade LeBlanc be your number two, quote unquote, something like that, just to kind of ease the pressure. And not that you don't care about the health of Wade LeBlanc, you do. You don't want him to get hurt, but like Wade, like take one for the team, buddy. You know, that type of a thing. So I could see that. Okay, so let's talk about the move that happened on the same day, and then we'll get to another pitcher the Orioles have added. So Alex Cobb, again, we've talked about this. I think we had all sort of been in agreement. We didn't think he was going to get dealt during the offseason, but Alex Cobb was traded to the Angels for infield prospect Jahmai Jones. I believe I'm saying that correct. So Jahmai Jones actually has played a little outfield, a little infield. He's listed as a second base prospect, and he's currently the Orioles' number 19 prospect after the trade. So, you know, let's again kind of break this in half. Let's talk about Cobb first and then Jones. So Cobb, important part of this, Cobb is due $15 million this season. The Orioles are going to be paying $10 million of that. So let's talk about Cobb departing. Are we surprised that Cobb got dealt, and also we're throwing so much money with him? You know, looking at the Orioles rotation as we just did, there's a lot of innings to fill there, and now having a guy like Cobb, who yes, he's had injury issues, but you probably could have counted on him for at least 100 innings if he's any kind of healthy. So are we surprised that Cobb was dealt this offseason, and also the $10 million we're sending with him, Jess?
I'm not surprised about the trade. I'm really not. The thing about it, yeah, I mean, the Orioles, like, they've demonstrated that, you know, they're fine going into a season without really any starting pitching. You know, like, we'll cobble it together, we'll, patchwork it together and find a way to make it work, right? And we'll survive the season, hopefully, right? So that's definitely the mentality, and that's kind of how they're thinking about it. But I guess the biggest surprising thing actually was the fact that the Orioles are paying 10 out of the $15 million. That is kind of surprising, but just because now granted, we did get a player in return, which you have to account for, but the Orioles are trying to save money. It's clear based on many of their decisions that they are trying to cut costs. And while this does cut costs, they probably could have cut costs more than they ended up doing. They probably could have paid $5 million of the contract and had the other team pay 10, or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, like you're saying, we also could have kept him half the season and then traded him at the deadline and paid half the salary or whatever, so there were other options like that too. But yeah, so I guess that is the surprising part, but I'm not surprised that he was traded.
Okay. Eli, do you have any similar feelings?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of on the opposite side of it. I think that this is about as good of a trade as I think it's a better trade than we could have hoped for. I think Alex Cobb has shown, no part of the pitcher we thought we were getting when we signed him to this deal. I think that he's been pretty much outright awful. Mm-hmm. And, he's kind of started to show something over these 10 starts last year, but we saved $5 million in paying 10. And we get back a prospect who's more highly regarded than any that the Rockies got for Nolan Arenado, which is a knock on the Rockies partially, but it does speak to this is the number 7 dude in the Angels organization. He's a former top 100 prospect. He is a pretty legitimate prospect. And, he is just about at major league level. He has broken into the majors, got a couple at-bats, like I think it was 7 at-bats or something. So he's pretty much ready to plug and play. He's a utility-type infielder, which is exactly, as we've been talking about, needed after we get rid of, 3 of our starting infielders from last year. And, yeah, and in return, sure, Cobb leaves a void, but you promote someone from AAA, and you probably get as many innings as you do out of Alex Cobb, who's always hurt. So, say you bump their salary up to the major league minimum, and then you're saving $4.5 million. You get a good prospect, and you get the same, subpar innings that you would have gotten. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I mean that's getting Cobb out the door is is a big deal in and of itself because I think we've talked about on the show, how much value is he going to lose between opening day and the trade deadline, given that we know what kind of pitcher he is. I'm not sure how much he would have lost, but the Orioles wouldn't have gotten this player. I don't think this prospect if they waited until the trade deadline. But also, it's possible Cobb has no value by the time we get to the trade deadline, either because he's hurt or because he's pitched so poorly. If you go on Baseball Savant and look up Alex Cobb's page, they've got the little percentile rankings on the side. You want those numbers ideally to be white or red. His are all blue, and they're all dark blue, and they're like exit velocities in the 6th percentile, hard hit percentage in the 4th percentile, expected batting average, the 2nd percentile. Like Alex Cobb is actually worse than a lot of his numbers, like a 4.3 ERA. That's not too bad, 38 strikeouts and 52 and a third innings, like not great, but there's been worse. The guy just gets smoked when he puts the ball in the strike zone. So, the fact that they got rid of him is interesting. I think it would be interesting to know about the conversations that have happened behind the scenes, because to your point, Jesse, the Orioles likely could have ate less of the money if they got a lesser prospect in Jones's place. So I wonder how many of those millions of dollars the Orioles think Jones is worth. Is he worth $5 million? Is he worth $7 million? So we'll see. Eli said he was the 7th ranked player in the Angels organization. Angels don't have as good of a farm system as the Orioles, so he is 19th for us, but still a top 20 player in the organization. I think he is now in competition for the major league roster with like the guys like Valleca to be sort of the super utility guy. He's played some outfield. He's played some infield. I don't think we're getting Jonathan Scope here, but we're getting a guy that can contribute right away and the Orioles can have control of for the next 6-7 seasons. So I think it's a great move. And again, I don't really care what money the Orioles spend. It's not my money. I want the Orioles to put the best team possible or the most entertaining team possible on the field. So if they want to eat $10 million, by all means, do it. And Jones, he is not going to wear the number 10 jersey, so you will have to buy new jerseys. You can't just wear your Adam Jones jerseys. So that is a disappointment. All right, any other thoughts on Cobb and Jones that we want to talk about before we move on?
Yeah, just to be clear, like I am happy about the deal. Exactly like Tyler said, if they paid all 15 and got Jones back, like I'd be fine with that, it doesn't matter to me, So but I was just speaking about it strictly from that kind of perspective. From the Angels' perspective, it is somewhat mystifying, I would say.
Yeah, I don't get it at all.
Yeah, it does not make sense because, I get the idea of having a cheap starter who you think will give you some innings, and, the thing is, he is hurt a lot, right? So that, you might not be getting anything when you're getting Alex Cobb, right? Yeah. So that's and if he was hurt all season or half the season, then the Angels would definitely be kicking themselves. But I'm just saying that if he was, if you could be guaranteed that he is going to start the season, I could see $5 million for a guy. The big thing comes up when you're obviously giving away a giant prospect for him. And at least in your organization, he's a big prospect, and you're probably not even competing this year, honestly. So that's what doesn't make sense to me is like they're giving up a future talent to get a guy who is questionable at best, and you're not even going to compete this year to win the division. So that doesn't make sense to me.
The thing that kills me about the Angels, and I know we're an Orioles podcast, but I just got to go on this rant for a minute. It's like you got Mike Trout, right? You locked him up. it's time to go all in and get Mike Trout to the playoffs and see what the heck he can do. And they have constructed this rotation of like, you know, at this point, it's like Andrew Heaney, Dylan Bundy. They signed Jose Quintana, who, was really good like 12 years ago. They bring Cobb on, and they're like amassing just these exorbitant amounts of mediocrity. They're just like, give me all of your semi-okay pitchers, and we're going to pretend that this is a good rotation. We're going to go out and we're going to make these additions, except they're not really going to add anything. And it's got to be infuriating to be an Angels fan because, I mean, this trade makes them no better. You have another person who can throw the ball 60 feet, 6 inches, and that's it.
And Mike Trout is looking to be like he could be in a Felix Hernandez situation, like for his career, and that would be horrendous for him.
Well, who says that?
Well, if the Angels don't compete, during,
okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying like he's gonna hit 30 and his arm's gonna fall off and he's not gonna be good anymore.
Oh, no.
I thought
that's what happened to Felix.
I thought you were saying the Orioles were gonna sign Mike Trout to a minor league deal. That's what I thought you were saying. No, we'll talk about Felix in a second, but I agree. The Angels thing is really weird. I mean, they're also just. It's not like they haven't been willing to spend money because they have. They've given out big contracts. They got Hamilton years ago, Pujols. They gave Rendon a ton of money. They went and got Ohtani. Not that he makes a ton of money, but it's just very strange. They are willing to do things. Just every lever they pull is the wrong one.
It's wrong.
It's shocking. The Upton deal. I mean, he was good a few years ago, but now he makes an absurd amount of money and he's not good anymore. It's just it's disappointing. But yeah. All right. Well, let's talk Felix Hernandez. We got him, guys. We got him.
We got the ace we've been looking for. Yeah.
Talk about a guy that was good 12 years ago. Felix Hernandez. Orioles have signed him to a minor league contract that is worth up to $1 million if he makes the major league roster. That's the question, guys. Is Felix Hernandez going to make the Orioles roster? Eli has a feeling on this. Go.
Yeah, I really think so. I mean, Jesse and I, our mother is from Seattle, so I consider myself a Mariners fan, second only to the Orioles. I've got, an Ichiro jersey in there. He was my favorite player growing up. And yeah, I think that Felix can make the team. He's a pretty consistent dude. He will not blow you away 96 with sync anymore like he used to, but he'll go out there and he'll throw up a barely sub-5 ERA and he'll do it pretty consistently. And I think that, having somebody who is as purely fiercely competitive as he is, he goes out there and he will scream and jump with all of his 89 miles an hour just the way he used to with his 97. He's a fierce competitor. And I think that, purely from the standpoint of looking at all the young guys that we have, putting somebody who's really a living legend, in the clubhouse, even if he is past his prime, I think that can never hurt. And I think that's incredibly beneficial. And, partially for that reason, I give him the edge over someone like Wade LeBlanc. I think he makes a rotation out of camp.
Okay. Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in complete agreement. I'm really, obviously, I don't expect much out of his ability at this stage, but I'm like, for somebody who will not perform to the extent that Felix Hernandez will not perform for the Orioles this year, I am at maximum excitement about this move, right? Yeah, I mean, just exactly what Eli was saying. Being just in the presence of, I mean, he's got to be a Hall of Famer, right? I mean, he doesn't have the 300 wins that is like the benchmark, even though that's kind of changing.
He had like 8-10 years of true dominance.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he also won the Cy Young when he only had 13 wins, and that was the whole thing. So right. I think if anybody's going to if there's anybody they're going to overlook the win total for, I think it might be Felix Hernandez.
Yeah. So, yeah, and of course, we all know at this point that wins are not at all a good indicator of a good pitcher, right? Yeah. But in any case, I'm so excited because, yeah, exactly. Like, we are going to have a legend in our clubhouse, and I really, just for that reason alone, I really hope he makes the team. I mean, I was really excited when the Orioles got Vladimir Guerrero a long time ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I was even excited when we had Sammy Sosa, like, honestly.
Jim
So
Thome,
Oh,
another
yeah.
Hall of Famer the
that's
Orioles
true.
had.
That's true. Right. Yeah, I mean, and I guess the one difference is, we're getting a pitcher this time. But yeah, I mean, I'm really excited, like, just, having him around the team. He's got to have some wisdom about pitching, at this stage in his career. He's going to be a mentor, and hopefully he can produce. But even if he doesn't, the thing I worry about for him is I just hope that, he goes out on a note that he's comfortable with and happy with in baseball. And how his time with the Mariners ended, was, I think, really distressing really distressing for him, by all accounts, and by, what we saw about him getting moved to the bullpen and everything like that. So, I just hope that, he doesn't have a horrible season and we have to cut him halfway through and then he never plays baseball again, or, like, I'm just saying,
Falls in a
like,
ditch, die. Like, it's very grim. You're painting a very grim picture. No, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that I hope that his career doesn't, fizzle out in a way that causes him a lot of pain and causes him a lot of frustration. I mean, to me, if I was him, I'd be, like, infuriated because, like Eli said, he is a giant competitor, and it's so sad to me that he's never played in a postseason game. And, with him being as good as he's been, I feel like he deserves, to have that competitive playoff atmosphere. Right. And it's sad to me that he didn't, but I'm getting on a tangent here. But
yes,
in any case, I'm really excited. I hope that he has a semi-decent season. But yeah, I mean, I hope he makes the team. I think he has a good shot to make the team because, as we were talking about our pitching staff, like, not only is the rotation thin, but the bullpen is better, of course, but it is not ideal. So I think there's opportunity for him there too if him being a starter doesn't work out.
I think the bullpen's pretty good, honestly. So I
Yeah.
don't. I mean, I think the Orioles could have
Yeah.
like a top 10 bullpen this year. But
No, that's true. But I think he could make the bullpen. I think that is possible. But I think he wants to start, though. At least in Seattle,
Yeah,
he
for
wanted
sure.
to start. So
For sure.
So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I think, if the Orioles can find a way to make him decent and make him on the major league team, it's going to be amazing. And, like, I'm going to be really excited to, if we can watch them play this year, or on TV. Like, I'm just going to be really excited to be able to watch him, and, like, if I did go to a game and he was the starting pitcher, just to, like, be able to, just to be able to, I mean, just to be in his presence, just to, like, him be on the mound and I'm, like, observing this happening. Like, it is, like, really a glamorous moment, like, it will be, or would be, for me and for fans, but yeah, I mean, just, I'm excited to have, the legend that he is, join the Orioles. So I'm really hyped about it, despite his ability at this stage in his career.
yeah, I mean, we'll see if there's any team in the league he's gonna make, it's the Orioles. That's a credit. Well, I don't know. It's kind of just a critique of the Orioles pitching staff in general. As bad as Cobb's baseball savant page looks, Hernandez is probably even worse. He didn't play last year because he opted out of the season. He was in spring training with the Braves. So maybe a full season of, not pitching. His arm got to rest. He got in some arm workouts, some things like that healed. We'll see. I'm not super optimistic. I feel like Wade LeBlanc has a better chance than Hernandez, which feels super weird to say. I'm not sure either one of them, if they makes it through the whole season with the team. It's rough. You look at a lot of their stats, their peripheral stats, and it's not pretty. But no, I mean, I'm all for it. I think it's really fun. We'll see. He's always been a really good pitcher, probably the best pitcher of this past generation, or one of the best pitchers of the past generation. I definitely think he's a Hall of Famer. So we'll see. We'll see.
Were you excited?
It's fine.
Would you call yourself excited or no?
I mean, look, his repertoire anymore is not super electric. It's not the 100 miles per hour. He's not Justin Verlander, who's the same age, even a little older, and can still get up and touch triple digits. He's in the low 90s, high 80s a lot of the time. So it's, we'll see. Camden Yards, I don't think is probably the best park for him. The AL East is a tough division for him. So we'll see. I'm not super optimistic, but we'll see. All right.
Yeah, I hear you on all that, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I'm all for it. If he makes the team, that'll be a lot of fun. I just have some doubts. But okay, let's talk spring training. This is all happening today, so we don't have everything solidified just yet. But it sounds like the Orioles are going to report, pitchers and catchers are going to report on February 16th, which is a week from today that we're recording this. The MLB and the Players Association have agreed on some safety and health protocols. This means spring training is going to basically look a little different than it has in the past. There's going to be fewer players in spring training than in seasons past. Don't expect to see Adley Rutschman, Grayson Rodriguez, DL Hall there early. They'll probably get there at some point. They will be in spring training at some point. But I think the Orioles are going to keep it small. You're seeing some teams like the Royals are bringing like 10 of their top prospects. I don't think the Orioles are going to do that just yet. This is COVID stuff. Plus, the minor league season is likely not going to start for about a month after the major league season begins. Again, more COVID stuff. And we're not entirely sure when the major league season is going to begin yet. That has not been solidified yet. It sounds like the current administration in the White House would like for the season to be pushed back a month to get into warmer weather. Teams want the season to be pushed back so that they can get into warmer weather. They can have more fans in the stands. So none of that stuff has been decided yet. But I don't know. What are you guys thinking? How do you think MLB has done enough this offseason? Do you think they prepared well enough, given that they had an entire season to figure this out? Have they done anything anywhere near enough to be prepared for dealing with a pandemic that has been going on for almost a year at this point? Well, more than a year.
I think the thing that's like probably most telling is that technically, the National League has had no official word on whether it's going to have the designated hitter or not. And they haven't even been able to figure out baseball things. So much less, figuring out how to run a season, with COVID protocols, a full season at that. It's been really pretty disheartening to just see like they can't get anything together. And the owners and the MLB sent over a proposal for a 150 game season that was pushed back a month, and people made a big fuss about the players union not responding to it. But it sounds like there's some stuff in the guidelines that if a conversation is had, then you have to have that conversation. And so the MLBPA was making a statement by not having the conversation, in which case you just have to proceed with the season as it was expected. So 162 games. And so there's just this back and forth constantly, and it's all very public and it's all very, and you just wish they could, go have a meeting and just figure something out and move forward with things. We had a season last year and we were able to get through it. And, COVID hasn't changed that much. So, like the assumption that we need to shorten the season this year because we still have things to figure out is a pretty disappointing one. We just did this and it worked reasonably well. They should have probably done a little better isolating the Marlins rather than letting the Marlins decide whether they wanted to play or not, something like that. But yeah, it's a really disheartening and really frustrating situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you brought up about the owners and the Players Association, their disagreement. I mean, that is the owners trying to warp the public perception of the conversations that are going on. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
the two sides have an agreement in place. The collective bargaining agreement is in place.
Absolutely.
You know, I
Absolutely.
mean, obviously we're in crazy times with the pandemic, and yes, the two sides should have conversations about it. But if they don't come to an agreement, you're playing baseball like normal, and the teams need to adjust to what the local cities and states tell them they have to do for stadiums. And that's on the teams to figure out. It's not on the players to agree to change their schedules on a whim. Yeah, it is. I mean, I would say sports leagues in general have kind of not prepared in the way you would have hoped them to prepare. The NFL had the longest run of anybody, and they weren't really prepared. They had outbreaks. They had to push games back, have games on a Wednesday. NBA has abandoned the bubble and has now had outbreaks. Major League Baseball is tempting fate here. It sounds like they want to get fans in there. They're going to have fans at spring training games. Spring training, they're going to put in Florida into pods of East Coast and West Coast of Florida. But even then, some of the stadiums are hundreds of miles apart. It's just like they're doing everything to turn their nose up at the pandemic when we know it has long-lasting effects. Eduardo Rodriguez missed the entire season last year and has heart damage from COVID, and he's in his mid-20s, late 20s. Like, it's maddening that there's no protocols in place, or there's protocols, but they've not done as much as they possibly could to prepare for what they knew was coming. Jesse, what's your thought?
Yeah, I mean, and the thing that I will say about this, right, is that, you know, like, I understand that it's hard to perceive it this way because we've been through this for so long. And, you know, when the pandemic first started, I think not that people should have been, because pandemics happen and et cetera, but obviously people were more or less shocked, right, that this was happening, right? So I understand, but like, we are in a like, numbers wise, we are in a worse situation with the pandemic than we were when everything shut down, right? So if, you know, now there are some, you know, benefits. We know a little more about what it is. You know, there are some minor things around the edges that are more beneficial or would give more leeway for allowing, you know, sports to resume as normal. But with that said, even with the more information that like doctors and scientists have about this virus, the numbers in the United States are much, much more disastrous than they were when everything started, right? And I know that, you know, looking at people's behavior, people are not treating it like they treated it at the very beginning. But we're in a worse spot now, and the same alarm that people had back then, they should have a higher degree of alarm now. That's how I feel about it, right? So if last season, you know, like, following this logic, right, if last season, you know, we played, you know, 2 months of baseball, right, then how I don't see the justification for how you're playing roughly a full season, and how, from a health and safety perspective, that's acceptable. I mean, now I understand that there are a lot of players who want to play and players who are willing to take the risk, etc. But that's my overall feeling on it.
Well, I mean, like, it's acceptable because you ironed out the protocols already, right? And you should be able, you know, to control the situation to a sufficient extent that you protect these players by and large from any outbreaks, you know, and you have the proper protocols in place because they should have been able to iron them out last year when they were going through this. You know, it's not so much about, like, that's what I was trying to say, is like, the risk is a known quantity, right? So we should be able to do what we got to do, you know, and just do it for a longer duration of time. You know, it's not like there's more risk every single day, or it's not like running it over 162 makes every individual day more difficult, right? If you follow protocols the way you're supposed to, all the players behave, all the teams behave, 162 should be the same thing, theoretically.
Yeah, I mean, so the only difference this year, that I can tell is schedule-wise. Last year, remember, they only played in East versus East, Central versus Central, West versus
Right.
West. So this year, with 162 games, the Orioles are going to play everybody all over the country. They're going to be going to that West Coast trip that always sucks every year, where they play 7 games in a row at 10 p.m. against the Mariners and the Athletics. They're going to be doing that. They're going to go down to Florida playing the Rays and maybe the Marlins. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at their schedule, but that sounds like that's out the window, which, there are already a few outbreaks last year, and that's when they just kept it tight. And that sounds like that's gone. And I get why you want to have as even schedules as possible to make the best playoff outcome. But, I don't think it's unreasonable to kick the season back a month. If that's what the outcome is, then sure, kick the season back a month. I think for spring training, to have the teams go and drive hundreds of miles, and in Arizona, it's a lot closer. In Florida, the stadiums are much more spread out. But to have the players traveling, to have fans at the spring training games, I think it's just dumb. You just have the teams isolated at their spring training facilities, nobody in or out, inter-squad games, and that's it. And then that's what you do. Some of these teams share facilities with other teams. Okay, then in those instances, those teams can play each other. But again, nobody in or out. I don't understand the need to travel more than necessary. And then for the regular season, you kick the season back a month. You get more people vaccinated. You get warmer weather, open air stuff. Then it gets a little more reasonable. But to just kind of proceed with a normal 162 game season, to be waiting this long to get protocols in place, is pretty frustrating. Not saying that this can't turn out okay and everything works out well, but it's a little crazy that they've waited until a week before players are going to report to spring training to get anything even semi sorted out. Baseball, MLB, always at the top of their game from the commissioner's office. You love to see it. Okay. Last thing, I think we've got some Orioles organizational stuff that I think we'll save for next week. But what I want to talk about real quick before we get to sort of our signing off stuff is Anthony Santander and Trey Mancini, two of the Orioles, arguably the Orioles' two best players, have drawn some trade interest this offseason. Anthony Santander, apparently the Marlins are interested in him. Mancini, I can't remember who Mancini were they talking to with Mancini.
I think it's the Braves.
You're
Braves,
right.
Yeah.
The Braves, yep. So the Santander stuff seems a little more solid than the Mancini rumors. I heard one thing about the Braves asking about Mancini. It doesn't sound like the Orioles were actively looking to shop him, whereas Santander, the Orioles, I think, were a little more engaged with the Marlins. So, what do you guys think about that? The Orioles talking about trading away two of their best players. Do you expect anything can actually happen with that? And, if they were going to move, what sort of a return would you want for, the Orioles' two best hitters? Jesse, do you have some – or Eli, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So one thing to put some water on the potential fire of the Trey Mancini trade is they did re-sign Marcell Ozuna. The Braves did. And I think they probably largely would have filled the same role as left fielder or potential DH, potential swapping out there if the NL is going to have the DH. But the Braves have re-signed Ozuna, so I think that, Mancini was a cheaper alternative to re-signing him in free agency. And so that bodes well for keeping Mancini. I really don't expect to see either of them traded. I think that Santander last year, he had a 575 slugging clip, really was impacting the ball at a pretty high rate. And he's still only like 25 years old. So, he's a Super 2 player, so he was eligible for arbitration this year. But we still have another 3 years of control over him. I think that he's as premium as it gets on the Orioles. And Mancini obviously still has a couple years, obviously performed at a really high level. I think we should keep both of them. We've talked about Mancini, how he's a fan favorite, how he's got the story with cancer. It plays well to have him on the Orioles. The dudes love him in the clubhouse. He's a fantastic player. He's a good leader. there's really no reason not to keep him around. He's not too expensive. That being said, like the returns for both of them, I think would be really pretty high at this point. We would get one pretty blue chip prospect, or a number from an organization's top 30, probably 3 or 4 from an organization's top 30 prospects. That being said, I don't think either of them should necessarily be on the trading block. I think Mancini, he will be at the back end of his career when the time the Orioles are good, but it might not hurt to have a veteran around. And with Santander, he's 25 years old and he's showing some really, really impactful stuff with his bat. And he was also, a borderline Gold Glover last year. Showed really phenomenal defense in right field. I think that he's somebody you want to keep and you want to build around.
Okay. Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree with what you're saying here. I guess I feel like I also agree that I don't think either of them will get dealt. The Orioles, I think, understand that there is no pressure on them to deal either of these guys. It's not like we're at the trade deadline of this guy's final season and we don't want to pay the $15 million we owe him, and we need to get rid of him, and we're not in that situation. We're not scrambling around. We're probably not calling people saying, hey, do you want this guy? We're probably just if somebody calls us, we'll listen to what they say. So the Orioles probably don't I definitely don't think it's like a high priority for them to deal either of them. I think that it would, if out of the two, I get what you're saying about Mancini being the clubhouse guy and stuff like that, but I feel like a team would probably want his bat and would be willing to trade something of consequence for his bat more so than, trading what I think would probably be a much bigger haul for Santander. And I could see like a Mancini deal working out from the Orioles perspective and from another team's perspective in a much better way than I could see a Santander deal working out from the perspective of both teams. So if I had to say one of them will go, I would say Mancini, but I think that's unlikely. And I don't think the Orioles have to be in panic mode if they love Trey Mancini and they can't watch a baseball game this year if Trey Mancini isn't on the team. So, yeah, definitely don't panic if you're a fan of either of these players. But, I'm sure the Orioles are listening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally fine with the Orioles hearing, calls on them. I think both of them are in a weird spot to be traded right now. Mancini coming off a cancer diagnosis, I would imagine the Orioles, if they got an offer, it wouldn't be of the value that I think Trey Mancini is. And I can also understand from another team's perspective, hey, this guy's getting back from cancer treatments, missed a whole season. We're not willing to give up a ton to get him. Santander, at the same time, had a really good season last year, but again, it was only in like 45 games. He has been kind of up and down, former Rule 5 guy, has a ton of time left under team control. I don't think he's a guy that I don't see him losing value between now and like July 31st, if that's when they wanted to trade him. So there's no reason to deal him unless you feel totally blown away. I think if you're going to trade one of them, I see Santander as getting the bigger haul, being the better value in a deal. So I think if they're going to trade one, I would expect it actually to be Santander and not Mancini, just because I think Mancini is one of those guys that has more value to the Orioles than whatever the trade return would be for him. Whereas Santander, he's a right fielder. The Orioles have Yusniel Diaz coming up. They've got Heston Kjerstad, who they just drafted. These are guys that they have replacements for. And, if you can get something of value for Santander, you get it. I'm wondering if the value is going to be there in the trade offers. If it's just the Marlins talking to them, you're probably going to need more than one or two teams getting involved. And then I wonder, teams can hem and haw at what kind of value Santander has. So I think we'll see. I wouldn't be totally shocked if Santander got traded this year. I don't see Mancini going. I think he's a guy the Orioles keep around, not just for his veteran presence and because he's a good guy, but just I think there's more value in keeping him than dealing him away. So something to keep an eye on. Trade talks are always interesting. The Orioles, Mike Elias is definitely still in sell mode. I think maybe that changes over to buy mode over the next year or two. But I would say probably for most of 2021, Mike Elias will remain in selling off the parts to pay for the future. All right. So like I said, we're going to talk about some organizational off-field stuff next week because I don't anticipate there being a ton of content or a ton of moves happening in the next couple days. So what I do want to talk to you guys about real quick before we get out of here is there's a new project going on in the world of Orioles podcasting and online content, and it is called BIRDLAND Tonight. What it's basically going to be is because you all know Masson has cut the pre- and post-game shows down to 15 minutes, and they no longer are going to be done by Rick Dempsey and Tom Davis or Davey Johnson in the studio and on the concourse at Camden Yards prior to games. So the guys over at Section 336, specifically Josh, have kind of picked up the mantle and are starting something called BIRDLAND Tonight. And you can learn more about it at birdlandtonight.com. Basically, all of us who do podcasts and write for different blogs in the Orioles online community are going to take turns hosting a post-game show after every single regular season game this season. The schedule is not totally panned out yet, and obviously we don't even know when the season is going to start for sure yet. But you're going to see guys from the Warehouse Podcast, from Section 336, from Bird's Eye View, from Give That Fan a Pod, from all kinds of Orioles shows that you know and love. So check that out at birdlandtonight.com. You can also follow on Twitter and all the different social medias at Birdland Sports. And like we said, we're not sure what our role is going to be just yet. We know that in mid to late March, we are going to take part in what's called Podcast Takeover Week. It's really more like a week and a half, where we're basically going to do our regular show, but we're going to do it through the Birdland Tonight channels. And you're going to be able to watch that live on, I think, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And we can even answer some of your questions or your comments. So get involved if you love the Orioles, if you love podcasts, if you love online content, go over to birdlandtonight.com. And shout out to our Eli for kind of getting us involved there and reaching out to the guys at Section 336 for getting our foot in the door there. I think that's all I've got for the Birdland Tonight. Are you guys excited to take part in that?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out, I think it was a super, super cool, like Tyler said, this guy Josh from 336, he quite literally threw out a tweet, and this is a super grassroots, just folks coming together from around the community. And I think it's going to be a really, really exciting thing. So stay tuned.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely unique. It's not something that I know of any other baseball fan community has done to this extent. But we definitely need your support. This is something that we're not getting paid to do. This is just something fun. My expectation is each of us will probably host 1 or 2 times a month. It's not going to be every single night, but if you guys like it, please check out the stream, check out the site. If we get some eyeballs on it, our hope is to maybe get some local sponsors involved. But until that happens, we're not making a penny off of it, and we're just doing it because we love the Orioles and we love talking baseball.
And the other thing, we will, if we are scheduled to appear and to do it, we will, of course, inform everybody and let you know that. The other thing is we're also, it might not be a situation where it's us 3 doing the post-game show. We might be mixing and matching hosts from different podcasts and blogs. That hopefully will present an interesting dynamic and, kind of bring us together a little more. We have very little and brief experience with most of these other guys that, we're in discussion with and everything. But yeah, hopefully it'll be something interesting, something you all can enjoy. I feel like on this podcast, I feel like our podcast works because I feel like we all kind of look at what is happening from a slightly different angle and a different perspective. Not that we have different opinions, but just what we are thinking about and what we choose to focus on with the news kind of is different. And it'll be interesting to expand that and to kind of be exposed to, these other people's perspectives, to be, working with them on a given night. So I think there's a lot of potential in it. It'll be interesting mixing it up. We don't, on this podcast, we cover the previous week or whatever, but we don't go in depth most of the time into a specific game and, break it down and analyze it to the extent that I think we will on these post-game shows. So we will also be talking about Orioles baseball from a different perspective when we're on the show.
Yeah, and Jesse, you and I, and when Marcus was hosting, we took part in Birdland Radio a couple of years ago. It's a lot of the same guys that were involved there. So if you liked that, you remember that, you'll like this. And again, it's not the type of thing you got. It's just like sports radio. If you just want to kind of put it on the background and enjoy, feel free to do it. But as Jesse said, if one of us is on it, we will let you know, and we'll let you know about that if you go and follow us on all the different social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at The Warehouse Pod. You can email us your hate comments, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. And if you want to learn where you can listen to us, it's Spotify, Apple, all that stuff. We've also got links to everywhere you can follow us and subscribe to us at thewarehousepod.com. And if you do follow us and you're able to, please give us a rating. A 5-star rating would be sublime. Any less than that, maybe just keep your opinions to yourself. So we'll ask you to do that. But I think that's about everything. You guys have any other parting words before we get out of here?
No, I mean, people can follow me at Juggernaut8678 on Instagram and on Twitter. People can always feel free to email the show.
Said that. Yep.
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, no, I know. I was reaffirming what you said.
Okay.
I appreciate when we get emails, so people can email us anytime.
Yes.
And I haven't done this in so long. Did I say everything I need to say?
Yeah. Well, Eli, where can people follow you real quick?
Yeah, right.
I'm on Twitter at Elijah Ginsburg. And I don't even remember what it is on Instagram right now.
I think it's Ginzy55 on Instagram.
Okay, it might be Ginzy55 on that one.
Yeah.
I remember I was saying my Twitter wrong at first. So.
Yeah. And then I'm on Twitter and Instagram at _Ty Young, and go over to CamdenChat.com and check out some of my blogging. But all right, guys. Well, thank you so much. You will be back. We'll be back next week with more of the Warehouse Podcast. Until then, I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
Thank you for listening.